a panel. So we've talked about decarbonisation. Now I have the Uranium crew, the yellow cake heads, joining us on stage. Now they're going to be led and instructed today by a fairly sensible human being. We've got Guy Keller, Managing Partner at Tribeca, joining us. And Guy, I'll let you introduce this motley crew, including Murray Hall et al. Andrew Ferrier did say that he was... Now, weren't you having a nice little intimate fireside chat this time with us last year? You were, just you and someone else in a pretend fireplace. It was beautiful. This year you had so much information. We've given you more people to interview. Would you please make him very welcome, everyone? And let's hear what's happening with uranium.
Thanks, everybody. It's good to be back. I could sit here for 25 minutes and just talk without these three. But I think we should probably get them up. So Murray, Stacey and Andrew, if you'd like to join me up here, it'd be wonderful, thank you. For those of you who were here last year, obviously we ran some uranium panels and fireside chats. I think the price of uranium last year was about $50 at this time of last year, and fast forward 12 months, we topped out at about $106 a few weeks ago, and we're trading in the low 90s now. So a lot has happened in 12 months, and we're here to unravel that. Just very briefly, before we get on to the wonderful panellists here, I just thought I'd give a bit of an update. So nuclear energy has been around since the 1960s. It's not new technology. Nuclear energy currently produces 10% of the world's electricity and is responsible for about 30 to 40% of the decarbonisation burden of that electricity. If decarbonisation involves electrification, if you don't decarbonise the electricity grid, you haven't actually solved the problem. You've just moved emissions from the city to the coal-fired power plant. Nuclear power is the only source of current technology of base load electricity that can deliver 24/7 electricity with low or zero carbon impact. So we're not competing with renewables. We are looking to provide a better baseload response. So what I'm going to do is, this is the one chance to have a little pitch on your companies. We'll start here with Stacey. Why is it the bright nuclear future, and what part is NextGen going to play in that bright nuclear future?
Well, it's a bright nuclear future, particularly because more governments and industries are recognising nuclear for the science rather than the false ideologies perpetrated in the past. We saw a pretty remarkable thing happen last year at the COP28 event in Dubai, where over 22 countries signed a declaration to triple nuclear capacity by 2050. I believe that number's now grown to 28, but it was the biggest endorsement yet of the role that nuclear energy will play in the transition away from fossil fuels. And that has also highlighted to governments and industries that there needs to be strong diversification of Western supply, as we've grown far too reliant on Eastern sources of supply, and that's where NextGen Energy steps in. We are a Canadian uranium and exploration and development company. We are triple listed on the TSX, NYSE and ASX, and our flagship asset is the Arrow deposit at our Rook I project. Now, Arrow is located in the Tier 1 sovereign location of Saskatchewan, Canada, and once in production will produce 30 million pounds of uranium for a mine life of 10 years. And that's over 50% of global Western supply and up to 25% of total global supply.
Thanks, Stacey. And if we just want to put that into perspective, that supply that's coming from this asset, and there's no doubt it's a world-class asset, we've got more than a decade of a primary mine supply deficit, because post-Fukushima, whilst Japan and Germany turned off their nuclear power, the rest of the world continued to use nuclear electricity, 420 reactors around the world. On the flip side, at the mining end of the equation, the capital's dried up overnight, and we've had more than a decade of underinvestment. We're now in the biggest reactor build program we've seen in decades, with 62 reactors being built, which is the most number of reactors since the 1970s, when France and the United States were building like crazy. When NextGen brings that deposit to market, the pounds coming out of that deposit will only fulfill the 62 reactors being built now. So put that in perspective. We've got a 50 to 60 million pound deficit already. The 25 to 26 odd million pounds a year coming out of that asset are going to for the future build. So we've got a really big deficit that NextGen can't solve on its own. Andrew, same question for you. Bright nuclear future. How does global uranium enrichment fit into that?
Yeah, thank you. Look, I think, everyone understands that nuclear is safe, reliable, clean power. And that is, that is undefeated. That is the facts. That is the science. So nuclear is going to play a huge part going forward across the whole entire globe. I think it's going to be a little bit different moving forward, obviously with the introduction of small modular reactors. I think that's going to play a big role in terms of, I guess, generally how people think about nuclear in terms of these small modular reactors becoming, readily available over the next 3 to 5 years and really changing how they fit into the power supply dynamics that these countries are looking for. And as Guy said, I'm the MD of Global Uranium. We're an ASX listed company. Where we fit in really is we have development projects in the US. We're the next wave of development projects that's looking to fill that massive supply deficit that Guy spoke about. There's just been a fundamentally uninvested in industry for the last 10 years. We've also invested into the enrichment space, which isn't discussed a lot, but it's a really important space in the nuclear fuel cycle. And we talk about yellow cake being in short supply. Uranium enrichment capabilities in the Western world just haven't been invested in over the last, for a very long period, and they've become very reliant on Russian enriched uranium. That's going to change over the next 5 to 10 years.
And Murray, same question.
Last but not least, Guy.
Last but not least. Saving the best for last, perhaps?
Absolutely. We've got assets, Elevate Uranium got assets in Namibia and Australia, top 4 producing jurisdictions for uranium in the world. We, unlike some of our peers, have gone and discovered, NextGen have discovered, but our peers in Namibia have all bought assets. We've gone and discovered our recent ones. We've got the largest land position for nuclear fuels in Namibia, a great jurisdiction in which we have 3 uranium mines developed in the last 18 years, 2 mining licenses granted last December. So a very active industry in Namibia. And we've got the largest land position, made 4 discoveries in 4 years. The first one of those discoveries was the Copies project, 48 million pound. We announced last November. We're about to announce another update on the resource in a couple of weeks. So we're active in that area. We're a little bit behind our peers because we've gone and discovered. We've had to find our resources, but certainly, and the other thing we do is shallow deposits in Namibia. We've come up with this disruptive uranium beneficiation process, so that adds significant value. So we can reduce the mass to be leached to less than 5%. So that's akin to a base metal operation where you can transport that concentrate off-site for value add, or you can value add on-site. So that's the optionality play that we have in Namibia in particular, and it's a great asset for it to have both shallow mineralisation in Namibia, exploration success, and our upgrade process.
Okay, so I guess this is a chance for my little pitch. So Tribeca have looked at this space on and off for a number of years. We delved into it about 7 years ago. We launched the Tribeca Nuclear Energy Opportunities Fund 6 years ago. As I said, the price is around $20 and it's moved to $100. We've managed to return 650% net of fees since inception, and people sort of say, what's next? The price has got to $100, surely there's a wave of supply. What we find with uranium is, unlike other commodities where high prices have solved some supply, there's a number of very complex issues that go on with uranium projects. We're lucky enough to have the 3 panellists here who all have assets in different jurisdictions. So we're just going to focus a little bit on jurisdiction because it's falling off. It's again something that's extraordinarily important. So Stacey, maybe we start with you. Canada, prolific uranium jurisdiction, lots of potential high-grade uranium, but still, the jurisdiction's not easy. Can you give us a little bit of elaboration on Canada and how that sits?
Yes, so Canada, obviously, it's a great sovereign location, stable political environment, stable regulatory framework with regards to legal and tax, and well-established mining infrastructure, tier 1 processing and production capabilities. But when it comes to uranium, it has been over 20 years since a uranium project has been permitted in Canada. We're the first to have done it. The permitting process still needs a little bit more I guess, efficiency, but we're working that as we go along. So yeah, it is tricky when it comes to permitting a uranium mine in Canada, but we are, the government is working to expedite that process, and governments and industries will need to work closely together to speed that up.
And just so Murray doesn't get upset that he's last again, we'll go to Murray. So Murray's got projects in Africa and in Australia, again, two of the other uranium jurisdictions. Africa, not every country is equal, and the same to be said about Australia with states.
Well, Africa's a huge continent, isn't it, with a lot of different countries, and Namibia and Botswana are the two best countries in Africa to deal with. Permitting, I mean, you talk about permitting in Canada. Permitting, we just had 2 mining licenses permitted in December for our peers. 3 uranium projects developed in the last 18 years, so there's history of it. It's the only country in the world with a dedicated uranium association, a great conduit between explorers, producers and developers and government. We have access to the government minister. We have a direct line to the mining commissioner. It's a good jurisdiction to be in, and you talk about, like, during the last sort of low cycle, you know, what Athabasca Basin went into care and maintenance. Yes, they got very high grades, and you could argue they preserved their high grades, but the longest continuously running uranium mine in the world is a Rossing uranium mine.
Yep.
Commissioned in 1976, right, in Namibia. 48 years of continuous operation. That's two generations of people familiar with uranium mining, less woke. I know you like that word, less woke over there, and certainly, you know, there's a history of uranium, so it's not a real obstacle for us. A lot of those mines are inside national parks. If you're inside national park in Australia or Canada, you're probably kicked out of the country, but 75% of Namibia's mining revenue comes from inside national parks, so that's also not an obstacle for us. So it's a great jurisdiction, really, and the low grades, I think Rossing are an example of low grades being able to develop and continuously operating for a long period of time.
And then you just want to quickly touch on Australia as well? I mean,
yeah, we do want to touch on Australia, but just very briefly. So I come from Western Australia, and unfortunately we've got a state government that's got their head in the sand and think that uranium's an evil thing. And that's probably, I think the Skyhawks wrote that movie, that song, the horror movie back in when you were a young guy. You know, it was all about the 6 o'clock news. It's a horror movie, and I think uranium's badly publicised, nuclear's badly publicised. They jump on any negativity, and that's what they've done. So they've scared a lot of Aussies. They're all woke now. You know, whereas the Northern Territory, we're looking in good shape. The government have come to us and said, look, we want to give you some grants to do some drilling. So totally different jurisdictions in Australia too, and the Northern Territory is a good one to be in.
yeah. And Andrew, United States of America, I mean, we hear a lot about IRA. We've seen presentations earlier about the Department of Energy money being thrown hand over fist, but it's not upstream. It's not. The United States government seems to think that the market should solve the mining issue, and they're not necessarily being that helpful around, you know, not in my backyard and things like that. Just talk to us briefly about the United States as a jurisdiction, given they want to be such a big nuclear power again. But
yeah, absolutely. So again, you shouldn't generalise about the states. The United States, it's obviously a big country. The projects we have are in Colorado and Utah, and we've had a lot of success in what we've required to do on the permitting front over the last 6 to 12 months. I think that's got a lot to do with the people in our team who have previously permitted uranium mines in the US over the last 10 years. So we've got a wealth of experience for a very small team. Colorado and Utah are good places to be. Wyoming, Texas, obviously can-do attitude states as well. You see Peninsula, you see Encore. They've made a lot of success there, and they're bringing mines into production as we speak. So we're very consciously, when we're looking at new projects, and even the state, it's like where in the state matters. Is it private land? Is it private minerals? There's a lot of things to go into what makes a project, you know, easy or difficult to permit. In terms of what the US government's doing, it's obviously throwing a huge amount of money into the conversion enrichment space. That's where it sees the huge vulnerability being at this point in time. I'm sure you heard this morning that just recently announced $2.7 billion of funding going into enrichment. That is to expand the domestic capabilities on enrichment. That's not directly going to any uranium miners, right? They are talking about banning Russian uranium, in particular, enriched Russian uranium. That is very close to being passed in the Senate. One senator outstanding to get across the line. That will have flow-on effects though,
Yeah.
right? That will definitely have flow-on effects. They're not writing blank checks to uranium miners. They have done some things in terms of uranium purchases along the way, but they're going to say, we've got domestic conversion, we've got domestic enrichment. The next logical step is source that uranium domestically.
Okay, and I'm just going to stay with you briefly, and then I'm going to go back to these two. You know, the United States, when you look at the Athabasca Basin, there's some very high-grade, large deposits. When you look at Africa, they're not as high-grade, but easier, easier to mine. Multi-year projects there where you can get a lot of pounds out. The USA tends to have a lot of smaller projects. Obviously, ISR doesn't matter so much, but conventional mining does. What do we need to see in consolidation? I mean, what conversations need to happen there to make some of those companies like yourself more relevant to be able to, stand up and say, we've got more pounds to deliver to the market?
Yeah, for sure. I think, look, if you think about the US, it's still got more nuclear reactors than any other country. It's 20% of their power. That's the biggest economy in the world. 20% is a big number. They need around 50 million pounds of uranium every year, right? That's a lot of ISR projects, right? So they're going to be looking for big producers coming into the market to fill their supplies. There are big projects in the US. The US until roughly 1980 was also a big producer of uranium until the 3 Mile incident occurred. So they need projects of scale, right, to fill this supplies deficit. They'll also look north of the border as well. They'll look to Australia, and they'll definitely look into Africa. So what they're going to see is, and what they're going to want is people. They're going to want to back certain people, certain management teams, projects of scale with management teams that know what they're doing. And I think that will play out over the sort of next 6 to 12 months.
And then just briefly, so, high-grade Athabasca, lower-grade Africa,
Yeah.
bulk moving operations, St Murray and Stacey here, both have their challenges. The higher the grade, the harder it is to, the human element, obviously. You don't want human beings in contact with big high-grade ore deposits. Africa, the lower grade, you've got to convince the market that you're able to, move that material. How do you respond to those sort of questions when investors say, well, I don't want to be in low-grade Africa, or how do you look at that? I mean, obviously here with the challenges of high grade, how do NextGen look at that?
We like to focus on our geotechnical setting and stress that our uranium is located in extremely competent basement rock, and because it's in that competent basement rock and not in that wet, unconsolidated sandstone like a lot of other uranium deposits are, we have an easier mining method of extraction, and we can use conventional bulk mining methods such as long hole stoping. Further, because we're located in that competent basement rock, we also can, we have quite clean metallurgy because there's been very little water ingress going through the ore body over millions of years. So we tend to focus on our geotechnical setting and our low cost and stress that as a feature of the Yarra deposit.
And Murray,
Mate,
front end?
The Coppy's resource, 95% of the ore's within 15 metres of surface.
Yep.
That's a surface miner. That's an easy exploration program and mining program. It's not complicated. So the challenges for us really are sort of the large area we've got. We've got a strike length of 20 kilometres. So it's just having a mining operation over that length of space. But 15 metres deep, I mean, that's, someone asked me once, is it an ISR? And I said, ISR? I said, where's your shovel? I mean, this is so shallow, it's ridiculous. I mean, exploration efforts are $1,000 a hole, right? Yep. Sorry, but you can't do that in the Athabasca. We can get over a lot of exploration, but we need to cover a large area. So that's the only limitation we've got, just a large area.
Okay, so we're rapidly running out of time, so I think I'm going to skip a few questions because we want to talk about the nuclear side as well as just the uranium. I don't need small modular reactors or advanced nuclear in my models to have well, no, we're going to go through the break. Look at everyone. You don't want a coffee or tea, do you? I don't need small modular reactors or advanced nuclear in my supply-demand models to see a deficit out past 2030. However, there's becoming more conversation. We'll start with Canada. I mean, OPG are starting to build a BWRX 300 on an existing nuclear site, of course, which gives them a lot more latitude. Is Canada going to win the race to be ex-China, the first small modular reactor, advanced nuclear?
Yeah, they certainly want to. So on that topic of those reactors, they're working with GE Hitachi to deploy 3 of those small modular reactors, and they're working on the legal and regulatory framework to deploy them, accelerate the deployment. So certainly they want to be the leading country when it comes to new nuclear technology.
And Andrew, you've obviously, in the nuclear fuel cycle, you've talked about the chemical enrichment. How important is that innovation to challenge those bottlenecks in the nuclear fuel cycle?
Yeah, I think they're fundamental, especially when you start talking about small modular reactors. So in traditional enrichment done through centrifuges, it enriches the U325 to about 3 to 5%, and that's what goes into conventional big nuclear power plants that most people are aware of. It produces obviously power and electricity. Small modular reactors, in most of the examples, require enriched uranium up to sort of that 19% level. That obviously requires a lot more enrichment. So there's, we've invested into an enrichment company called Uranium, which has a chemical enrichment technology. It's being developed in Australia as we speak. It's fascinating in terms of how it could be applied and plugged in potentially around existing enrichment plants to help it, it upgrade up potentially at the front end. And that's what's going to play out. There's going to have to be a lot of money spent and a lot of innovation.
And Murray, just very quickly, is it going to be tech, AI, data centre companies, or is it going to be miners that bring small modular reactors or micro reactors to market first? Who's going to win that race? Will BHP put a micro reactor in, or is NVIDIA going to solve their electricity problems?
From what I heard earlier, I don't think they're worried about, these tech guys are worried about energy, so I think it's going to have to be the mining industry or the nuclear industry that bring it forward. It's not going to be the AI pushing forward. That's one of the lesser worries that they've got, if I heard that conversation correct. So yeah, I think it's going to have to be the industry pushing ahead.
And on the basis that we're all here next year, and I know you guys hate being put on the spot price, next 12 months, where does it top out? It's been from, I'm on the record of saying $175 a pound.
I just
it's
want
currently
to quote,
at 91. Where's it going to go in the next 12 months?
Can I quote a guru? He said to me, don't ask me if it's going to go to 150, ask me why it's not going to go to 150. Oh, that was you, wasn't it? Yeah, look, I'm a 150 guy.
150?
Yep.
Andrew?
Yeah, 150 on the way to 200.
Okay, Stacey?
I agree with you, 175.
All right, there we go. It looks like it's onwards and upwards, but we're all invested in the sector, so don't necessarily take our word for it. Thank you very much, guys, for being here today. Thanks very much for having me back at the end of this year.
Thank you.
And
Thanks, guys.
I think it's great. I think there's almost a dozen uranium companies here this conference, and a lot of them are next door. So please go and make yourself known to them and ask them any questions, because they've got a wealth of knowledge that 25 minutes didn't cover. And I think we've got afternoon tea now, or are you going to take it?
No, you do it. Go on, that's good.
No, I'm done. That's it.
You're
I'm
done.
off the clock.
We're done. Go and enjoy afternoon tea. I'll ring the bell, probably about 25, 30 minutes. Thank you very much, team. That was very informative. Really enjoyed it. Thank you.